medical news, health, fitness
with Dr. Ajai Seth.
Hi there, today we've got something very different as we talk to sports psychologist Serena and Dr. En about esports and gaming. We discuss just how quickly the gaming industry is taking off and what that means for the physical and mental implications of gamers. If you are a gamer and you feel you could benefit from further advice or support from us, please feel free to get in touch. Hope you enjoy listening. So, hi everyone, welcome to Ask the Expert, and got a very, very exciting episode today. We're discussing something completely new, and it's to do with the wonderful world of esports or electronic sports. And I've got two very distinguished guests on today, Dr. En, who is a GP, and Serena McLeod, who is a sports psychologist. Serena, tell us a bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so I've been in the UK now for about 7 years, working towards becoming an accredited sport and exercise psychologist. And I've kind of worked within esports in the last year and a half or so. Worked in traditional sport for about 3.5 years. And I've become really interested, I guess, in the last year and a half, obviously with the pandemic, and kind of becoming more interested in the crossover between traditional sports and esports. So I predominantly work with individuals, adolescents with various disabilities, whether that be developmental, intellectual, physical. But yeah, really looking forward to getting to know a little bit more about your backgrounds today, and yeah, whatever I can do to kind of help out.
Thanks, Serena. And then just tell us a bit about where you work and what you do.
Yeah, so I guess you describe it as a portfolio GP career. So I've got quite an extensive background in medical education with the Royal College of GPs with national and international roles. And at the moment I work in some rehabilitation, and I've got a background in tech to some degree, having previously hosted a forum on social care and technology development, and worked at Babylon and currently at Livy.
Let's talk about esports. I mean, some people are familiar with esports, and I think everyone knows it's a growing field from what they've seen in the news or what they've read about it. But what is an esport? Serena, give us a definition of what an esport actually is.
So esports is essentially electronic games, and this ranges from various games. You have League of Legends, there's Minecraft, but there's various games in terms of that range from a professional level, semi-professional level, all the way to grassroots. But essentially it is online gaming, electronic gaming, and an opportunity for individuals to compete against individuals around the world. So I think that's something that's quite interesting about it, to be able to virtually compete against other individuals.
And when most people think of gaming, they think about the classical games that are out there, so the Nintendos and Sega back in the day, and everyone around the Wii at Christmas, that type of thing. But things have moved on since then, haven't they?
Absolutely. I think the level of complexity that some of these games have. I was actually speaking to my brother. He's an avid League of Legends player, and he was trying to kind of talk me through kind of different kind of technical strategies, and it is just so incredibly complex, in terms of different strategies, but also the reaction time. So it's very complex, very enhanced in comparison to let's say about 25 years ago when we were playing Super Nintendo and Donkey Kong. But it's super interesting, the level of complexities and also the diversity in terms of the games.
And why has that happened? What's changed? Is it the technology that's become more advanced, or is it just because when I was playing games, I remember using all my fingers and digits and was very mentally engaged. But if there's higher levels above that, what's changed?
Yeah, I think it's all of that actually, and I'm a bit like you, AJ, in that I played games until maybe the end of secondary school, and then stopped. When we got on the medical career ladder, there just wasn't time for it. And in that sort of 10-year gap, I started playing again, and I'm a casual player of League of Legends. It seems to be all of that. So from the design point of view, very much the complexity point of view. For me, mainly though, it's the teamwork side that seems to have really exploded. So back when we were young, yes, you could play sort of football games together, and you could collaborate, but you could also sort of hog the ball and it could still work, right? Whereas in the modern esports, it's purely a team enterprise. There's second by second communication, and the decision making has to happen as a five.
Yeah. Just to clarify, we're still young, so
that's true.
But I know what you mean. But so things have evolved, haven't they? And I guess again, a lot of people probably think, oh, that teenager in the bedroom on their own playing games, not sort of healthy for them. But actually, there is a real complex social network going on out there with multiple people connecting, interacting at the same time, and just there's a whole online world out there, isn't there?
Yeah, for a lot of individuals, this is an opportunity for them to actually create those social relationships. And if you talk to a lot of the professional gamers, they'll say that the biggest component of the positive aspects of engaging in esports is that social connection, and an opportunity again for them to connect with other individuals that are very similar to them. I think that social connection is huge. And again, it's being able to connect with individuals all around the world.
And people do that already, right? So people will do that through Facebook or Twitter or any form of social media. So I guess it's just an extension of that online connection.
I think there's sort of two ways to look at that. So that I think, yes, you can have a wider community of gamers that you link up with, and they can be your social network. But within a team itself, the professional players I've spoken to talk about needing to know what their teammate's going to do before they do it, in the same way that a football team or a rugby team will do. So I think that image of a singular person in a bedroom is quite outdated. So to get to any sort of to get to a higher level, you really need to be playing with your team together and knowing them and be in the same room. And actually, all the professional teams, they sort of live together and practice together 24 hours a day.
What is the size of the market?
I mean, it's huge. If you look at in terms of growth from 2019 to 2020, it's actually increased by 42%. And I forget the exact figure in terms of growth from 2020 to 2021, but it's immense, and it's going to continue to grow, around the globe.
And I mean, there was some talk that it's going to overtake traditional sport at some point in the future.
It's highly possible, just because the barriers to entry are so very low. I think you mentioned some consoles earlier, and that's interesting because now the most popular games are PC or Mac based. So I understand more people play League of Legends than even own like a PS, the latest one, the PS4 or 5. So yeah, everyone's got a laptop and a mouse at home and an internet connection. So yeah, just the interest in it is going to explode further.
And like you said, it's a very accessible sport, isn't it? I mean, traditionally, so if you look at the traditional or the most traditional sports like football or soccer, for example, that was deemed to be accessible because all you'd need is a bit of space in the ball. Where you're more your more elitist sports, say, for example, rugby, tennis, golf, would require some financial backing and time and expertise and equipment and all the rest of it. But actually with League of Legends, for example, you can play it on your computer, it's downloadable and it's just instant.
And I think that's kind of the beauty of esports, is there's not kind of a difference in terms of like socioeconomic accessibility, right? Like you're saying with traditional sports, with cricket, golf, tennis, those are very expensive sports. If you come from a low income background, it's not going to be as accessible for you. But esports is something that is so accessible. Like you said, I mean, most individuals will have in their home a computer, right, and a mouse, and that's really all that you need to access it. So it gives individuals an opportunity to be a part of something that they may not have other access to do so.
Yeah. And it's also a space for those who aren't perhaps like genetically, physically gifted.
It seems like a very important release or an outlet for a whole variety of people to be able to compete and to be able to get involved and interact with the whole world of gamers. And that's just it, isn't it? It's I think also traditionally we thought perhaps certain communities or certain countries are more suited to gaming or have that gaming culture, but actually it's a worldwide phenomenon now.
I think it is, but it's still very far behind in terms of the UK and Western Europe compared to East Asia. I think there's more established routes and pathways to playing in places like Korea and in China. I don't know if that's what you've noticed, Serena.
Yeah, in South Korea specifically, if you look at, for example, so South Korea has an academy that actually helps individuals that are retiring from esports transition into, getting jobs and actually having a career outside of esports. Wow. And that's something that's really lacking if you're looking at from a North American or UK perspective. Yes, things are improving, but providing those individuals an opportunity to have a plan outside of esports, because the average age of individuals that retire, I mean, we're talking anywhere from age 18 to 25, right? And a lot of them may not have gone on to kind of do that secondary education. So you're basically looking at a group of individuals that haven't had that extra education, and then they retire, and then what? Right. So it is a huge gap there. And I think, like I said, slowly it's becoming better in terms of recognizing, the impact of retirement and that transition to, having a career outside of esports. But it definitely needs to be more support there.
I think we've established it's growing, it's exponential. There has to be some acknowledgement that there will be changes in people's lifestyles and the way people live, essentially. If 1 in every 5 teenagers is engaging with esports, and some of them want to make a career out of it or recreationally very involved, what do you think are the main health considerations or lifestyle considerations around that?
There is a culture of grinding, of putting in as many hours a day as you can. And you mentioned sort of the esports bars, and that maybe reflects that the existing culture and lifestyle amongst players, and in that they like to keep you there as long as possible. They have
for financial
sort of constant food, and constant sort of food and drink deliveries, so you don't have to ever get up out of your chair. It's I imagine there will be a lot of lifestyle problems, and there are a few famous pro athletes that have had to retire very young, not just with musculoskeletal injuries, but with things like diabetes and just general health problems.
I mean, in the world of sports medicine, we're already trying to tackle a childhood obesity epidemic. The highest rates of childhood obesity that have ever been in the United Kingdom, highest rates of early onset diabetes, all these sorts of things. Is this something to worry about, or is this something that actually is just going with the natural trend, do you think?
Absolutely. And this is something that the British Esports Association does mention in terms of the importance of taking breaks. And having a routine in terms of, okay, training is from, 7 to 9, and then having that break of either exercising or doing something outside of esports. And I think it kind of comes back to, I think, the athlete's fear of, what are my competitors doing? Or, it basically means that I have to train X amount of hours to become better. And so they basically, look at, a 10, 12, 14-hour day of training as the only way to really improve, and not taking into consideration the importance of breaks and the importance of having routine, including, good sleep, nutrition, exercise. So I do think that it, unfortunately is going to continue to become a problem unless organizations and governing bodies really, encourage them to implement exercise, implement, different kind of activities outside of gaming.
Yeah, so from the professional sort of body side, that's very important. But I've also heard from players talking about just a lack of awareness amongst health professionals generally. So I've had pro athletes tell me they go and see a GP about back pain, and they're just told to, just generically get out more or practice less, which you can't do if you're planning to take this on professionally and it's going to be your main source of income. So there doesn't seem to be much structured information coming from our healthcare service in the UK.
And just before we move on to discussing the perhaps mental and psychological effects on the population, are there any positive lifestyle effects from esports? So at the moment, for example, from a governing body point of view, the Football Association is the governing body for football in this country, and they will document positive effects from playing the sport, playing football, how it can help you, how it can help mental health, blah blah blah. So is there something to be said about the positive health and lifestyle effects that esports can have on the population, even if that sort of sense of community?
I think that psychosocial aspect is huge. Again, giving individuals a sense of belonging to be a part of something, whether that's at a professional level, that they are part of that team and they're with their teammates a lot of the time, or just a grassroots level, right? Giving that individual an opportunity to connect with other individuals.
So, Serena, just tell us about the psychological, perhaps, implications of, from a population point of view, lots of people spending their time in gaming bars or at home gaming. I mean, what kind of behaviours are positive from that that kind of actions, and what might be quite negative from that?
I think, again, it comes back to that psychosocial component in terms of creating a sense of community, sense of belonging. I think there's a lot of concerns in terms of obviously the sedentary behavior, which then leads to various mental health issues such as depression, anxiety. But I think, it's a tough one, because you have these individuals that are really saying, I've read articles, for example, esports kind of saved my life in terms of having an opportunity to engage with other individuals that actually understand me. But on the other side of the coin, it also has the inverse effect where, sedentary behaviors again, lead to those chronic conditions, lead to, mental health decline. So it's really hard to find that balance. And I think, the main thing that, again, governing bodies and different organizations can implement is, the importance of having breaks and the importance of, having a specific routine when it comes to training and really having gaps in between. I think it's also, as well, if you're looking at from a professional level, the amount of kind of online abuse that they have to endure is another big thing as well. And having to really deal with that. I think also having to deal with having kind of fame at such a young age. Like, for example, if you look on Twitter, some of the top organizations and top esports athletes, they have some, hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of followers kind of watching them on their, 24/7, right? And they are, completely intertwined with their life. And I think that kind of stress and pressure, and lack of privacy can really impact their mental health. So I think, there's a lot. Obviously the psychosocial aspect is a huge positive, but I think there are a lot of kind of downfalls in terms of not recognizing the importance of having support at a very early stage in their esports career to ensure that they're getting that support.
How young are we talking? Are we talking sort of 10 onwards in terms of that sort of pressure?
Yeah, I think the youngest one that makes, if we're talking millions, he's about 13. So you're talking a 13-year-old that is, an adolescent going through puberty, having to manage all these different expectations and pressure. That's a lot to put on a 13-year-old.
What are your thoughts, Serena, on addiction? Is this an addictive behavior, and what's the science behind gaming and addiction?
Absolutely. It consists of repetitive behaviors. right? And I think it was 2018, the DSM-5 actually recognized it as an addiction in terms of esports addiction. And it's very similar in terms of the behaviors of gambling, in terms of it is very repetitive, right? And I think the more that you do it as well, the more reward you get, right? So the more that you train, the more that you compete, it actually enhances your performance, right? So it's very difficult, again, to kind of have, that gap and an opportunity to kind of step away, because again, gamers, like I mentioned earlier, have that fear of, oh, well, if I don't continue training, I won't get better, right? And especially in comparison to their competitors.
There's a lot of pitfalls here, isn't there? When you think about the whole esports world and the way it's growing. And I would imagine that's probably of a consequence of it growing faster than we can understand it, either scientifically, medically, or psychologically. And a lack of guidance from the governing bodies or from the esports stakeholders, really, that are producing these games and producing the materials. I mean, what stuff out there is there from a population point of view? What sort of associations are out there?
I mean, from a professional level, they will have either what they call a mental performance coach, a performance psychologist, and they will have that support in place. They will have kind of a multidisciplinary team that will essentially support them. But if we're looking from a semi-professional or grassroots level, those individuals don't have the same mental health support, right? Even a semi-professional team, for example, won't have that same support. They will have limited resources. And I think the biggest thing is lack of education and lack of awareness of engaging in repetitive behaviors and consistently playing for years on end, right? And not really understanding the implications of doing so, both from a physical and psychological standpoint. So I think education is key, for those organizations to really make it clear of the implications of, engaging in esports repetitively, but also, implementing support at those kind of lower tier levels as well.
We know now that actually things are getting more involved from a professional point of view, and gamers are moving on from a grassroots, like you say, into semi-pro and then professional. How easy is that transition? I mean, what do you need to do to go from grassroots to professional?
Well, in the UK, I'm not sure there's a very structured way of doing that. So the players I know that have made it or almost made it, they just started playing in school, made a personal decision to take it seriously with a team, a group of friends, and then started signing up for local tournaments with fairly small prize pots. And eventually you're just trying to get the attention of the professional teams and managers. But it never sounds particularly structured, like with football academies and teams having feeder teams. But I think this varies a lot from sort of country to country. I understand in North America now there are like collegiate scholarships for esports. I don't think that's available here yet, though. I understand there is a sort of university association of esports that organizes tournaments, but I don't think there's these sort of feeder programs. So it's very much, it's like the Wild West. You just start, you try, and then you apply, try and make a name for yourself. And alongside that goes streaming on Twitch and things, like trying to build up a reputation.
Yeah, it's almost like having a brand, isn't it? I guess as a player, you want to create a reputation around you and a brand, and then a team. So Serena, you mentioned a performance team, and I mean, if I'm a grassroots player and I'm working my way up, when would I be able to access that sort of higher level of performance support? You mentioned like a psychologist, a coach, medical. When would I sort of be able to access that? Or
I would say on average, you'd wait until you become professional. Again, the semi-professional teams, unless you have access to funding, will not have the same support and the same kind of multidisciplinary team that a professional team does. And, there's many issues with that in terms of not having that support along the way. And yes, there's not kind of a distinguished pathway in terms of, going from grassroots to professional. It really depends on, kind of competing in different tournaments and stuff like that.
What does a professional gamer need? What from a psychological point of view, what does a professional gamer need to have? What attributes? And how can a professional like yourself help them?
I think firstly, emotional arousal, emotional regulation is huge. You need to it's very different from traditional sports because, traditional sports, you need kind of those high adrenaline levels and almost, for example, if you're playing football, you need to kind of have those high arousal levels and high adrenaline. But with esports, it's very kind of finite movements, right? So you can't be over aroused. So I think, managing those kind of regulating those emotions is key. And I think, other than that, it's being able to kind of manage, especially at a professional level, social media, having, constantly kind of being watched by, the rest of kind of the esports world. I think that's a big thing as well, especially when it comes to online abuse. That's definitely been, I think, one of the biggest problems when it comes to, at all levels, really. But being able to manage that, right, and having, having that constant kind of criticism as well is really hard. So I think, being able to kind of build resilience and being able to, as well, being able to focus on relevant cues and not kind of being distracted by, the external kind of stimuli is huge as well.
How good generally are professional gamers at looking after themselves, self-managing? I mean, how much life experience would they have had, and how can you support them with that?
And this is the thing, right? Because if you're looking at the average age for somebody that becomes professional, right, we're talking like 15 years old, right? So that individual wouldn't have had a lot of experience in terms of, being able to manage and take care of themselves in terms of having a, regimented training schedule and nutrition and sleep. And they wouldn't really have that education there and understanding. So I think a lot of it, to be honest, is being able to help them with that kind of life balance, right? Of being able to help them with, I've helped an athlete create a routine, right? Because he was having a really difficult time with actually being able to separate training time, competing time, and then, outside activities. And he said, look, I need to train, for at least 10, 12 hours a day, which is unfortunately the average when it comes to kind of those lower levels. But even saying, okay, let's have a break, 10-minute break to kind of go outside and get some fresh air. Even things like that. And that sounds so simple, but that at least gives them the opportunity to have a break, being able to switch off, and just as well as kind of physically being able to move away from that sedentary behavior. So I think, being able to help them in terms of implementing a routine is huge. Being able to kind of support them in terms of emotional regulation and different kind of mental skills there. But I think it's also being able to manage the fame and be able to manage kind of being at that professional level and what comes with it. But I think for me, kind of just from my experience, especially working with, adolescent boys, I think the biggest thing is emotional regulation and being able to manage, for example, let's say that if they make, one wrong move, and being able to manage, because in a millisecond they have to make their next decision. So it's being able to overcome just making that mistake and being able to move on to the next play.
How interesting. And so we've talked a bit about age and how young they are. Is it mainly boys, or is the female population growing in terms of gamers?
It is growing, and I know that we mentioned earlier in terms of kind of funding opportunities or scholarships. So University of Northampton, where I went, actually has a program for female gamers, and it's just to kind of get them more involved. But it is increasing very slowly, but it definitely is increasing.
What sorts of things would, if a professional gamer, benefit from in terms of their, improving their performance from a health point of view?
Yeah, I think there's huge amounts, really. I think it's very important to focus early on the longevity of your career, which, like Serena's saying, a lot of people are starting in their early teens, playing seriously many hours a day without really any regard for avoiding both the physical and mental problems that come with playing that many hours a day. So on the physical side, the common things to be avoiding are sort of lower back pain, scapular, shoulder pains. A very, very common one is wrist injuries, tendonitis, or carpal tunnel syndrome. I find it amazing.
Just on that, and that's presumably gamers are spending lots of time in a position playing. but perhaps with not the best setup from an ergonomic point of view.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then they're just taking ideas from other fields. Like they'll go on the internet and look up what a good sort of office layout would be for their laptop and their mouse. But it's a world of difference being at an office job for a day and playing esports for a day. For example, in League of Legends, in a 30-minute match, you might be right-clicking something like 4,000, 5,000 times.
Wow!
In about 30 minutes.
I'm sure even the best Excel workers are not going to get to that sort of rate.
No, I struggle to hit those numbers even when I'm going very fast. But like in a normal, if you're just browsing the internet, that might be about 200, 300 clicks, left clicks, using slightly different, part of your wrist and flex tendons. So it's just if you can imagine practicing that for 12 hours a day, vigorously clicking. It's no wonder that people are having repetitive strain and various other inflammatory conditions in their wrist and flexors.
A lot of the advice we give ordinary workers, obviously people have been working at home during lockdown, a lot more time in front of the computer, longer hours, etc. Is you can have all the advice and guidance on your setup, but actually it's how that applies to you and your sort of lifestyle. So I imagine those principles are completely transferable into gamers. So it's not really about which gaming chair you have or which mouse you've got. It's about how you apply that into your training program, into your whole package as such, to reduce the risk of injury. But what would a professional gamer do to increase their strength within the muscles of their back, of their shoulder, of their hand and wrist to avoid injury? And I don't think that information or that knowledge is just there yet.
It's just not, and that's an area that really interests me. So I imagine in your roles, Ajay, that there's a lot of cross training and sort of making sure the muscles that are neglected are built up in all the sports that you deal with. Whereas there seems to be very little, perhaps outside of the professional teams with their specific, physios, there seems to be very, very little information out there beyond sort of, just get up and stretch every now and then and roll your wrists around. And so from all the players I've spoken to, there was no structured advice. In fact, there was stigma. It was the opposite. When they went to see their health professionals, they were just told, that doesn't sound serious, or we don't have anything for you here. And
that's not good, is it? I mean,
no.
You have to treat each person as their own individual and just try to get their expectations and their requirements. For them, that, like we're saying, it's a big part of their life. The other thing I hear a lot is people saying, "Oh, actually, I pay 12 hours a day. I get all the exercise I needed for those movements." But actually, they're not considering the body as a whole. And like you say, the cross training element, working other muscles that might be able to support certain structures, certain movements in their body.
Absolutely, and also no one's watching them. So again, in a professional physical sport academy, I mean, people be not just giving you some information about how to move, but they will watch you and correct you or film you and have all these ways of intervening in the way your muscles are moving to
And often there's really simple interventions you can do that make a big difference. If you're holding these positions for quite a while, simple things can actually make a big difference. So that, I mean, that's very interesting from a physical point of view. What about so we talked about reaction times, we talked about obviously these are young people, so generally eyesight is normally quite good. What kinds of things does a professional player require in terms of reaction times and eye movements and that sort of thing, and how can that be enhanced?
It's absolutely massive. So in all the games, perhaps mostly in the first-person shooters, the reaction times are incredible, and like with any other sport, the people playing at a professional level, they're like the 0.001% of the population in terms of what they can do. But it's a whole field that's understudied. So in terms of how to maximize those reaction times through other practices or cross training or lifestyle and diet, it's mostly unexplored. It's a new field.
there is kind of different various ways that you can enhance their training. For me, I guess, of course, my main kind of criteria is helping with their performance. But to be honest, most of what I do is more so on the well-being side of being able to help them kind of find that balance.
I think this is just highlighting how unexplored it is, because actually eye movements is very important in racket and ball sports, for example, where you're having to track balls coming out fast movements, or Formula One, another great example of where reaction times can be developed to some degree, or at least the anticipation of the reaction. So I mean, there's a lot of studies out there that are suggesting that reaction times itself can't be changed, but your anticipation of the next occurring event can be trained. How gamers can enhance their predictability of the next moves, and I imagine all this stuff happens in remote milliseconds. That's definitely a field that I would imagine will need to be explored a bit further and growing.
There's a lot about predicting the next move from the animation, so what the character that you're facing, and there's 154 characters in League of Legends 155 now that you need to learn. How you can predict where they're going to move, or what kind of spell they're going to cast based on the first few milli or microseconds of the animation in the game of that character. So that's something that's talked about a lot, but yes, I'm sure from the performance side of things, massively underexplored compared to something like a tennis toss.
It also depends on it also depends on their appraisal. So their appraisal, basically, our brain kind of looks at things in one of two ways. We either look at things as a threat, or we look at things as challenge. And when an individual kind of perceives things as a threat, essentially our brain says, okay, well, I don't have the ability to do this. I don't have the ability to kind of execute this task. But when we look at it as a challenge, we actually think, oh no, I have the coping mechanisms to really deal with this. So appraisal and kind of our ability to cope with situations also has a big impact on performance. And that's actually some of what I do in terms of helping athletes kind of change that appraisal, especially if they're kind of perceiving certain elements of the game as a threat. So changing that appraisal from threat to a challenge state.
And I just want to pick up on one last point to do with the professional gamer, and that is, you mentioned lifestyle. So from a medical point of view, so we were discussing earlier about obesity and diabetes. What kinds of basic checks would we want to be doing from a medical point of view, from a lifestyle aspect? It is like things like blood pressure monitoring, that sort of. Is it just about the basics?
I think because a lot of players are still very young, I think a lot of it would be preventative, knowing their daily routine, thinking about their nutrition, hours spent playing, and very much a mental health focus as well. So there's a huge problem with burnout in the community for a lot of the reasons we've talked about, so far, and also the stigma of playing games seriously or professionally.
But a lot of it's to do with self-management, though, right? So, for example, if you've got your health on your agenda, you're more likely to inherit and perform positive behaviors. So, for example, checking your blood pressure every month or so, or making sure you are eating well or sleeping well. So is it really just about that positive behavior reinforcement at that sort of stage as a preventative sort of measure, as you mentioned?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so some regular checks and regular sort of interventions, or like an MOT from all aspects, like the ergonomic aspect, maybe a performance aspect. And yeah, we talked about diabetes, like type 2 diabetes occurring very young because of how extremely sedentary some of the professional athletes.
I just want to end on asking you both, firstly, how you got into gaming, and secondly, what would be your one top tip for a gamer who's either professional or semi-pro or even recreational, and in just in terms of how they can improve their health or their performance?
I think I've always been a bit of a sort of secret gamer and sort of playing low skill games, on and off. But the last year or two, I've like I said, I've started playing League of Legends I say casually, but actually it's quite a few hours a week, as we've talked about.
Yeah, it's getting a bit more than casual now, isn't it?
Yeah, we were talking about I need a safe word, don't I? I do. But it's been amazing. So it's what I found interesting about it is in the past I felt guilty about playing games because I felt like the skills weren't broad enough, and they weren't deep enough to warrant the time I spent on them. Like, I was being attracted to the game because I liked the visuals of it, or I was like an escape from the rest of the world. Some of these modern games, they are as enriching and exciting and complex as any activity you can do, and I think there's an ongoing stigma around them, which is a bit of a problem. And my one top tip, well, hopefully in the future, very soon, there'll be more professional advice that people can get. Because I think just taking things off the internet or having sound bites of advice is just not enough if you're going to be training in anything in your life for 12 hours a day. So I'm hoping there'll be more structured, health screening or performance screening, and places to go when you have problems. I'm hoping there'll be more of that very, very soon.
Yeah, so my biggest influence is my brother. So he was diagnosed with autism about 2 years ago now, and I noticed that it was something that was a big part of his life, and that he was very excited to kind of share different things with me. So yeah, that really kind of started my overall interest in esports, and kind of being able to develop more of a relationship with him. And he's taught me so much about various games, especially League of Legends. I feel like I know the ins and outs of it now. But yeah, I think as well, noticing that there's a huge gap in terms of support. I think, if you look at traditional sport athletes, especially from a semi-professional level, a lot of sports have that support there, but it's recognizing that there's not a lot of support for esport athletes, especially at a grassroots and semi-professional level. So I really wanted to kind of provide that support for them. And I think, in terms of my one top tip, I think it's really simple. It's just implementing a routine and implementing breaks, and knowing that it's okay to take breaks. I think that's the biggest thing, because I think, again, kind of going back to what I said earlier, is athletes do really worry about the amount of time that they train, and that really enhances their overall performance, and being worried about what their competitors are doing, but knowing it's okay to take breaks. And I think lastly, I'll do a second tip, but I think lastly, it's knowing that support is there. So knowing that they can reach out for support if they are really struggling. I think that would be my second thing. I mean, there's sports psychologists that work within the field, mental performance coaches, psychologists, clinical psychologists, mental health organizations, but it's knowing that there is support there if you are really struggling.
No one should really be going through anything alone. There's lots of support out there. There's lots of advice, even though the industry is in its infancy. I think there's always help to be found. Guys, thank you so much. I think we are definitely going to need to come back and discuss this further at some point, as the industry goes, as we have more different areas to talk about within esports from a health and lifestyle and psychology point of view. But for now, thank you so much, and we'll see you both soon.
Yeah, hopefully see you on a game of League of Legends. Yeah. The three of us, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. Well,
I'm up for it.
I've been playing all this time, by the way. So, all right, guys. Take care. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for listening to LBSM's Ask the Expert series. We really hope you enjoyed listening. If any of the topics discussed are relevant to you, or you want to find out more, please get in touch by phone, email, social media, or visit our website. Thanks again, and see you soon.